مساكم الله بالخير مشاهدينا الكرام، احييكم في هذه الحلقة الجديدة من برنامج تحت المجهر 19. حلقتنا اليوم حلقة علمية، راح نستضيف أحد أبرز الباحثين في كندا وعلى مستوى العالم المختص في مجال الكورونا. قبل ما نتكلم مع ضيفنا من كندا، خلوني أرحب بزميلي اللي راح يشاركني في تقديم هذه الحلقة، الأستاذ المشارك في كلية الطب في جامعة الكويت، الدكتور محمد جمال. دكتور محمد، مساء الخير.
هلا استاذ ابو عبد العزيز،
حياك الله. اليوم عندنا الدكتور آيزاك بوغوش من كندا من جامعة تورونتو. باختصار عطني لمحة للمشاهد الكريم، من هو الدكتور آيزاك بوغوش؟
طبعا هو يعمل في تورونتو جنرال هوسبيتال، وهو يعد واحد من افضل 4 مستشفيات في العالم في التصنيف الجديد، وكذلك في جامعة تورونتو وهي من اهم الجامعات البحثية في العالم. له 3500 استشهاد علمي والعديد من الأبحاث في مجال الصحة العامة والأمراض المعدية، نشر الكثير منها حاليا في موضوع الكورونا. تحدثنا في الحلقة الأسبق عن بحثه عن تقدير الحالات في بعض الدول ومنها دولة جمهورية مصر. مجلة الفوربس كان فيها مقال ينصح بمتابعة خبراء حول العالم في هذا الموضوع، وضعته في أعلى الليستة، أهم واحد تتابعه حاليا في العالم حسب المقال في مجلة فوربس هو الدكتور آيزاك بوغوش. فأتمنى يعني أن نوصل إلى العديد من المعلومات البحثية المهمة اللي تعتبر المواضيع الحارة الساخنة علميا مع موضوع الكورونا.
طيب، احنا على ما يجهز اتصال الدكتور آيزاك بوغوش من كندا، خلنا مع بعض نشوف هذا التقرير ونرجع مرة. It's great to have you, Dr. Isaac, in this program.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. Look forward to chatting with you.
It's our pleasure. Dr. Isaac, COVID-19 is a pandemic now. In the Middle East, we see what's happening in Italy, which was a wake-up call to everybody. So let's start from Italy. What went wrong there?
Well, I mean, there's been a few countries where I think this has taken off really quickly, and it's obviously very sad and unfortunate to watch this happen. And essentially, some countries were better prepared than others, and I think there's a lot of factors that go into why some countries are doing a little bit better than others. Certainly in the countries that we've seen that have had some challenges, like Italy and Iran, for example, and now, sadly, the United States and France and maybe even Spain, we can see that there's a variety of reasons. One is that there have been some barriers to accessing healthcare. There have been some barriers to diagnostic testing. There have been some barriers to surveillance. And there have been perhaps slow measures to start these social distancing policies that we know can slow down transmission. Now, all these places aren't the same, but those are some commonalities between them that might be reasons for why they are having a challenging time compared to other countries.
What do you think of what President Trump said yesterday about chloroquine? He sounded like it's the magic bullet for this disease. What's your take on that? And if you can give us a brief update on the treatments available for COVID-19 now.
Sure. So that's a great question. I know, we have to be obviously very careful with what we hear in the news. I think some of it can be valid. Some of it might be a little bit of hype, and we have to be very skeptical readers. Now, I really think that the early data for chloroquine looks promising. I don't think we have any data right this minute that's completely confirms that this is going to, be a potent drug in the treatment of COVID-19, but it's certainly possible. So the early studies that really enrolled there's one study that I know of that enrolled about 30 people, demonstrated that the group that did receive chloroquine had a reduced duration of shedding the virus, which was pretty helpful. Interestingly, in that one study, they also added azithromycin in some people, and that even further reduced viral shedding. So I think there are some arrows pointing in the right direction, and this is going to be very helpful.
So it reduced viral shedding, which means that it will reduce the infectivity of the carrier, but did it shorten the duration of the disease, or did it reduce the severity of the disease in this early study?
I think it's actually too soon to tell because it was really on such a small number of patients. So this is one of those issues where I think we've got to be very careful about speaking beyond the data. And I think we have to be very careful about ensuring that we really put this data into the appropriate context. No one should be making broad generalizations about hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine in this situation. No one should be making broad generalizations about the addition of azithromycin.
Dr. Isaac, we know that coronavirus are mostly active between January and May, and we know that SARS stopped suddenly in June. Are you hopeful that this virus will be less active in summer?
No, I'm not. I think that's a little cavalier to say, yeah, you know what, summer's coming around the corner, we're going to be okay. I think we've got to be very careful about that. And I also should remind you that even though SARS stopped in the summer months, I don't think it was because of the weather. It's because there was basically a really good understanding of how it was transmitted, and that just happened to coincide with when this outbreak started and the massive infection prevention and control initiatives at hospital levels and at more regional levels were employed. I think the same holds true with this. Listen, at the end of the day, after this pandemic, when everything starts to settle down, certainly it is possible. And one of the theories is that this infection will integrate itself into a seasonal infection, much like influenza, and we'll start to see it in the cooler months. But I think we have to be very careful about saying that it's going to happen during the course of the pandemic. I think during the course of the pandemic, all rules are out. And in the past, we've even seen things like this happen before. So, for example, in 2008, 2009, we had the H1N1 pandemic. Now, H1N1 is an influenza virus, and the influenza virus is also a winter virus. Yet, this just tore through communities during the hot summer months as well. So during an epidemic or a pandemic, I think a lot of these seasonality rules may be out the window. And after the epidemic, after this has run its course, it may integrate into a seasonal component. But I would be very cautious about being comfortable saying, you know what, this is all going to be over in the summer. Still, one more point.
Go ahead.
It's March right now. It's March. We can look at China, we can look at other places that have had more time with this virus, and it has taken those countries about 3 to 3.5 months to get this under control. So if you think about it, I'm in North America right now. It's mid-March. It's really the end of winter and into spring. And of course, in 3 months' time, it is going to be the summertime. So I think we have to be careful about making these false attributions when really our social distancing measures, our public health measures, everything that we're doing now is really working to get this under control. And then, of course, it's going to be July and someone's going to say, see, I told you so, it's summer and it's over, when in fact it was probably the public health measures that are getting this under control rather than the warmer temperatures.
So I just have a follow-up question on my colleague. Now, do you think when it becomes a seasonal virus, will it be less virulent and less severe than now? Do you think the virus will mutate somehow in which it will be less severe when it becomes seasonal in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to clarify one point. First of all, we have no idea if it's going to become seasonal. That's just a theory, and it very well might be. And secondly, if it does become seasonal, yeah, I mean, things change, viruses change, and we know, for example, year after year, sometimes we have different strains of influenza, and some at a population level pack a harder punch than others. Maybe it will be, I don't know, I really don't know, and I think we have to be very humble here that we don't have all the answers to this, and a lot of this is just speculation, and are making our best guess for now.
Now, since SARS in 2003, we knew that Corona family are going to come again, and they came again with the MERS in 2012. However, we did not see any development of vaccines for any of those severe corona or the more virulent corona viruses. So why do we think now, by bypassing the process of the FDA, we are going to get a vaccine soon?
Well, I think you raise a very good point. We have to have foresight here. We've had SARS, we've had MERS, now we have COVID-19. This is not going to be the last coronavirus that we see. We're going to see this again, and if it's not COVID-19, it's going to be another coronavirus. And you raise a really interesting point because, when we think about what's prioritized for funding, what's prioritized for science and research, we don't often take this long view. And certainly after SARS, there was some interest in making a vaccine, but of course that fell by the wayside. Now, of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and everyone is kicking themselves in the butt saying, why didn't we fund this? Why didn't we fund coronavirus vaccines? We've had programs, we've started funding, and there's been a little bit of work on this front. Like we could really use a vaccine right now. And of course, it wasn't that well funded for a long time. And now we're scrambling to fund vaccine efforts for this. And so I think it's going to be a while until we see a real coronavirus vaccine that becomes available. But obviously it's going to take a bit of time. It's probably going to take over a year.
Dr. Isaac, talking about your studies about on travel medicine, we saw from your study on Iran that Istanbul was the city most linked to Iran. Despite that, we didn't see a lot of cases there. Should Turkey be worried?
Well, I think truly in the middle of a pandemic, everybody should be worried. No one is immune. No country on planet Earth is immune from this. Obviously these viruses don't care. These viruses are traveling around the world, and they don't care what your political or economic situation is. They don't care what your public health infrastructure is. This virus is moving. Now, a lot of the work we can do, and a lot of the work that I've been involved with, can sort of look at where the virus is more likely to go and track how this virus can spread, and even estimate the burden that certain places may have for this virus. And by and large, these models have been pretty accurate. I mean, our early work showed how it was going to spread from Wuhan to parts of East Asia first, and then we had some studies looking at China as a whole and looking at how it would spread from China. And of course, the one that when we're looking at Iran, obviously, my love and respect to the Iranian people. I feel terrible. They're certainly having a tough time with this epidemic.
Right, this is my second question.
Really
what about Iran now?
All together. And I really hope that they come through okay in the end. But of course, when we look at travel from Iran, Iran is pretty interconnected to its neighbors. It's pretty through flights. And now, of course, we know that there's many travel restrictions and travel bans, and travel is being restricted tremendously. But before those went up, Iran was probably having a significant number of cases, and certainly we now know that Iran has exported cases to a lot of the neighbors, including Iraq, probably Lebanon, most certainly it's been exported to Turkey as well.
We discussed your study on Egypt here in the program, and we mentioned that it was accepted for publication at the Lancet Infectious Disease, which is a a great journal. You also posted the actual study on Twitter, and we discussed that. Now, could you please elaborate on this, as some rumors say that it was rejected and that you apologized for publishing it?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I think we should just sort of clear the air here. Let's preface this with, again, I have nothing but love and respect for the people of Egypt, and the same holds true with everyone else in the world. I really, truly want individual countries to fare as best as they can with this infection, and what we can do and what we have done. This is, I work with a physician, but I also work with a research team. So I'm not going to take credit for all of this work. This is truly a team effort. There's lots of people working on this, and what we've done is we've been able to look at a few things. One is we're able to look at how this infection can spread throughout the world and sort of predict where it will go and when it will go there. And we can also use some pretty interesting mathematical models to sort of predict the burden of infection in certain places. So we did our study, and again, to be quite fair, I mean, the methods of our study is nothing that exciting. I mean, we used validated models of predicting the burden of infection in a particular place. This time we did it with Egypt, but again, this has been done with Iran, this has been done with Italy, this has been done with the United States, this has been done with lots of other places in the world. And we discussed, and this is like a well-validated way of estimating the burden of infection. So I mean, the science is pretty clear.
And it was accepted at Lancet Infectious Disease. It was accepted at Lancet Infectious Disease.
Yeah. And we were very open and transparent about that. And of course, listen, I'm not here to talk politics. There's no value judgment here. This is science, medicine, and public health. The whole goal is we just want everyone to be healthy and well. And this was obviously not meant to disrespect any political organization, any group of people. This is really just meant for health and wellness. And I've got to say that,
Dr. Isaac,
we did the exact same thing for many, many other places as well. And, of course, you all know what happened next. There was a rather vigorous backlash against this. And again, people are entitled to their opinions. That's completely fine. But I think that there seemed to be a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding about the methods, about the predictions, and people just assumed that there was maybe some nefarious causes here, and really there really isn't. And I think some people.
Dr. Isaac.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Just before we end, what's your advice for a small country like Kuwait? We have done a lot of testing so far, and all shops, restaurants, cinemas are closed since last week, although we had only around 100 of cases. So what's your advice for a small country like Kuwait?
It sounds like you're doing everything right. At this point in time, it's social distancing measures, and if the restaurants and coffee shops are closed and people are able to work from home and people spread out and don't come into close contact with each other, I think you're doing something right. And the other thing that really needs to be done is, in the healthcare settings, you really need to have a large scale up of diagnostic testing to make sure that people who are sick get tested. Also to make sure people who are sick but not sick enough to be in hospital get tested as well. If you have this wide scale of diagnostic testing coupled with these social distancing measures, I think you'll fare much better than other places.
Dr. Áizák Bógós from Toronto General Hospital, thank you very much for the time and the great answers. It's truly a pleasure to have you and a privilege. Thank you.
Wonderful to chat with you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you Dr. Isaac.
Okay.
طيب دكتور محمد، بشكل سريع إذا نبي نعرج على أبرز النقاط اللي يمكن ذكرها الدكتور آيزاك قبل شوية معنا في اللقاء، أنا وايد لفت انتباهي جوابه على سؤال الصيف، لأن كثيرين الآن
كان في أمل،
كان الأمل أو التوقع أن ترى إن شاء الله تحملوا بعد شهر صيفنا جاي وموضوع كورونا راح ينتهي. الدكتور آيزاك أعطانا إجابة مختلفة، تعليقك؟
طبعا هو ركز أن في وقت الجائحة تسقط هذه الاعتبارات، تسقط المواسم. قال لك في وقت الجوائح أو في وقت الوباء نفسه لما يكون مولع في ذروته تسقط كل هذه الاعتبارات، وتسقط اعتبارات الصيف، الشتاء والمواسم كلها. فيعتقد أن الصيف قد لا يؤثر كثيرا على هذا الفيروس، ولازم ما نحط أملنا في الاعتماد على تغير درجات الحرارة في قتل هذا الفيروس. بعض الخبراء كانوا يقولون ما دام السارز الأول اللي سنة 2003 انتهى فجأة شهر 6، هذا الفيروس مشابه جدا للسارز الأول، فممكن ينتهي مع درجات الحرارة. ولكن هو أيضا وضح أن هناك أمور أخرى غير درجات الحرارة ساهمت في وقف السارز سنة 2003 ولم تكن درجات الحرارة أهم.
المقارنة مع السارز مش بالضرورة تنطبق مع كورونا.
بالضبط أستاذ عمار.
طيب أيضا واحدة من النقاط اللي لفتت
في نقطة مهمة في المواسم ذكرها كذلك، قال إن احتمال يتحول إلى فيروس موسمي مثل أي إنفلونزا. فسألته هل راح يكون less virulent، لأن هناك نظرية أن الفيروسات علشان تصير موسمية وتتكرر تصبح أقل خطورة على الإنسان، وهو أجاب على هذا الموضوع. قال نظريا قد يحدث هذا، أن إذا تحول إلى فيروس موسمي قد يكون أقل خطورة على الإنسان في ذلك الوقت.
وهو راح يتحول إلى فيروس موسمي حسب كلامه.
نظرية ليس بالضرورة. قال لازم نتواضع مع هالفيروس لأنه علميا، لأنه فيروس جديد لا يعلم ما الذي سيحدث معه في المستقبل، ولكن حتما كما يبدو من كلامه أو بشكل كبير أنه راح يرجع مرة ثانية.
طيب واحدة من الأمور أيضا اللي ذكرها موضوع التطعيم، أن التطعيم، وسؤالك يمكن اللي كان له علاقة بتصريح الرئيس الأمريكي ترامب، وذكر أن التطعيم ترى الموضوع ما هو مسألة أشهر وقد يطول لفترة.
نعم. أول لو تلاحظ الرئيس الأمريكي مرة طلع أن احنا اختصرنا التطعيم وبسرعة راح نطلع التطعيم، مرة ثانية طلع قال أنا وافقت الحين على الدواء الجديد الكلوروكوين والهيدروكسي كلوروكوين وكأنها أدوية جديدة. كلامه ما كان، طبعا ذكر أن هناك دراسة صغيرة على هذا الدواء الكلوروكوين بيّنت لما نخلطه مع دواء ثاني اسمه أزاثيوبرين بيّنت أنه ممكن تروح القدرة على نقل العدوى وممكن يخف المرض مع هذه الأدوية، ولكنها دراسة صغيرة جدا ونصح أن لازم ننتظر دراسات أكثر. بالنسبة حق التطعيم، السؤال كان أن السارز كان موجود من قبل، الميرس كان موجود من قبل 12 سنة تقريبا، الحين 16 سنة ما وصلنا حق تطعيم إلى واحدة من هذه الفيروسات. ليش بهالفيروس راح نلقى تطعيم؟ ذكر أن بالسابق ما كان في توجه بحثي لتمويل هذه الأبحاث، ولكن قد يكون في تسريع لإنتاج التطعيم، ولكن ما يعتقد أنه راح يكون أقل من سنة.
طيب قبل ما أختم دكتور محمد، جواب الدكتور آيزاك الأول عن إيطاليا وجواب الأخير عن الكويت، ذكر أن في إيطاليا قاعد يتفشى المرض لأن في بعض العوامل أيضا اللي ما تم السيطرة عليها وما تم أخذها بشكل جدي. بالكويت حسب ما ذكر أن من المعلومات يمكن اللي أنا قلتها قبل شوية أن لا جيد الإجراءات اللي يتم اتخاذها بالكويت. فرق إيطاليا عن الكويت، أبي تعليقك على هالنقطتين.
طبعا هو ذكر في الجواب الأول العوامل التي تؤدي إلى تحسين ردة فعل الدول تجاه الكورونا، منها تغطية النظام الصحي، تطبيق التباعد الاجتماعي، وكذلك التحضير وإجراء الفحوصات. يجب أن تفحص قدر الإمكان. احنا بالكويت اجرينا الكثير من الفحوصات، احد اكثر الدول في العالم التي اجرت فحوصات في العالم. طبقت التباعد الاجتماعي بمرحله مبكره جدا، يمكن قبل المرحله طبقت، اكيد قبل المرحله طبقتها اغلب الدول الاوروبيه، ومتشدده في هذا التطبيق، والشعب عنده ثقه في اجراءات الحكومه. الحكومه الان عندها ثقه بالشعب في تطبيق هذه الامور، وهذا شيء مهم. كذلك الكل متغطي في النظام الصحي، الفقير والغني، الوافد والمواطن، الجميع مغطى في هذا النظام الصحي، وهذا ما تجده في الكثير من الدول، منها مثلا الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. فبالتالي احنا عندنا كل العوامل التي تجعلنا قادرين على التصدي لهذا المرض. وزارة الصحة والحكومة اتخذت موقف متشدد في مرحلة مبكرة مع هذا المرض، سبقناه قبل لا هو يسبقنا إلى الآن.
إن شاء الله. كل الشكر لك محمد، دكتور محمد جمال. مكملين إن شاء الله في لقاءاتنا القادمة إن شاء الله.
شكرا بأول العزيز.
مشاهدينا الكرام، قبل ما أختم بأخذ كلام اللي ذكره قبل شوي الدكتور محمد جمال. بالكويت ما عندنا مشكلة ضمان صحي، يمكن اللي قاعد يعانون منها كثير من الدول، واللي قاعد تتسبب في انتشار هذا الوباء أكثر وأكثر. ومشكلة التباعد الاجتماعي احنا ايضا في الكويت خذينا فيها خطوات ايجابية قبل كثير، لكن نحتاج اكثر واكثر واكثر ان نطبق موضوع التباعد الاجتماعي. يا جماعة الخير، الحكومة كل يوم قاعدة تطلع وتناشد الناس قعدوا في بيوتكم، قعدوا في بيوتكم، لا تطلعون. الوضع لازلنا مرة ثانية احنا في البدايات، الوضع قد يكون أسوأ، لكن بالامكان محاصرة هذا الفيروس اذا التزمنا احنا وقعدنا في بيوتنا. الله يحفظكم من كل شر، في امان الله.